Alrighty, welcome back to the Defying Gravity podcast with Zach Goodman. Today, I'm going to do a bit of a Q&A. I got some questions over the last week that I'm going to answer here, along with some ones that I got through Twitter last night. I posted a Q&A thing. So if you ever have any questions, shoot me a DM, or if I post those Q&A tweets, you can reply to those or whatever. But I got 6 questions here that I'm going to answer. Um, so let's get rolling. First one. Do I deadlift often, heavy or moderate reps? Okay. My kids deadlift every Friday. So we're going to pull heavy after we squat. So we're always going to squat first, then we deadlift heavy. Okay. So is it heavy or moderate? It's heavy. We don't deadlift moderately. I used to do some speed pull stuff like dynamic effort pulls. Kind of got away from that. So either we're going to deadlift relatively heavy, or we're going to deadlift for reps. Okay, so I really like high rep rack pulls and RDLs and things like that. So deadlifting every Friday. We always deadlift Friday. We don't deadlift any other day of the week. We deadlift Friday. It's our last heavy lower body day of the week. So we use brief maximal tension. So Friday, we're going to use brief maximal tension on the squat, and then we'll go pull right after we squat. Okay. Rep wise for heavy pulls, we're generally going to program. I like to do a lot of fives, threes, and singles, but we'll rotate in doubles and fours as well. So really anything between 1 and 5. And generally, the deadlifting programming is relatively simple. I don't try to complicate it too much just because we're doing so much on the squat. It's usually just one top set or 2 top sets of 5 or 3. When we get down to singles, I'm never really going to give them a top set single. I'm usually going to give them multiple sets of singles. So I usually give them like 3 sets of 1 or 4 sets of 1. But like this week they deadlifted, I think they did 1 set of 4. So we did a top set of 4. Next week we'll probably do a top set of 3 or a top set double. And then our last week of the wave we'll probably go a couple singles. Okay, and that'll give them an opportunity that if they are feeling good after they squat, they want to pull a heavy, max, and they can max their deadlifts. Okay. So that's pretty much the way that I handle deadlifting right now. As far as like other things, like for sumo deadlifting and we're conventional deadlifting, that's going to be heavy and that's going to be low reps. If we're doing like RDLs or rack pulls or stiffs or anything like that, that's more of a variation of a deadlift. We're going to usually do those for reps. Okay. So I've given my kids rack pulls for like sets of 15 or 20. I like rack pulls, not for the reason that most people like them. I don't like rack pulls for like overloading the deadlift or anything like that. I like the rack pull literally just for the hinging portion of the lift, just giving reps in the hinge portion. I use it kind of like how some people use the 45-degree back extension. I use the rack pull like that to build up some volume and strength in the lower back, glutes, and hamstrings. So that's what I like to do it with, and it doesn't take very much to recover from because you're not pulling from the floor. And I do like pausing though. I think I put a video out this week about that. So that's kind of the way that I handle deadlifting in the program. I have ran speed pulls before. They're good for like technique work, but ultimately the best way to get kids to get something out of their training, but also to build up like the coordination needed to move heavy weights, they just have to lift heavy weights. Secondly, how much progress can an in-season athlete expect if they're training hard and they are training and they're playing a sport? So I think this is going to be individual. It's going to depend on what the kid's training history looks like. Is this athlete someone that trains year round? They only train a few months a year. What does their intensity look like? What age are they? There's like a lot of factors that are going. If you can't just give a blanket statement of how much progress a kid can make. But generally, from what I've seen, if a kid is disciplined in training and you pull and you kind of manipulate the training variables in their favor, like there's no reason to think that you can't add, upwards of 5 to 15 pounds to their bench a month, assuming they're not gaining weight because they're in season. Squatting, I mean, I've added upwards of 50, 70 pounds that could squat in a month in season from a kid that really doesn't train very much. Again, this kid was an older athlete. To older athletes, you can progress a lot faster than younger athletes who just take a little bit longer. So yeah, in season wise, like there's no reason to expect that progress should like maintain or go backwards if they're being consistent. But ultimately, it depends on what their intensity of their schedule looks like. If you have a kid that is practicing like every day and doing extra skill work and doing really high intensity practice, like you're probably not going to be able to give them the amount of volume they need to progress really fast. But you can give them a stimulus, so they're still gonna see improvements in their strength and their lifts. Jump wise, generally jumps go backwards in season. It's not necessarily always due to the training. Sometimes kids are just overran in their sport. Same with sprint times. Sprint times usually regress in season. It's pretty rare to see a kid get faster in season, mostly because their practice schedule is really intense. Uh, Coaches generally overrun kids. They don't give kids enough rest. So they kind of, the sharpening that we do with the nervous system in the off season kind of gets degraded in season. Um, and so it's just something that you just deal with. But if the strength is going up, you know that they're just not able to display the force right now. And that when they get into the off season, they're going to start being able to learn how to display that force at higher velocities. So it's something that I don't worry about. I just worry about making them stronger and giving them that stimulus of high velocity, whether it's jumping or sprinting. I generally lean into jumping a lot more than sprinting. I'm not a fan of sprinting a ton in season. I would much rather see a kid jump just because it's much easier to recover from. You can build up enough volume, and acceleration wise, most sports are played in acceleration phase. So I would rather just sharpen the acceleration portion and leave max V sprinting for the off season. Maybe unpopular. That's what I do. So hopefully that answer your question about how much progress an athlete can expect. Like I said, if the kid's younger, it just depends on their strength level, right? If a kid's benching 90 pounds or whatever, like you're probably not adding 30 or 40 pounds to his bench in like a month because he's weak, right? I think that's a misconception, is like the percentage of strength that they can add is a little bit different, because it's just like 5 pounds is more to a 90-pound bencher than it is to a 300-pound bencher, So if you're looking at percentage wise, you should be able to add quite a bit more percentage to their strength. But like when you're looking at actual weight, it's going to be relatively lower for a weaker kid. That's the reason why a kid that benches like 185 is going to add 40. He's going to get to 225 faster than a kid that's going from 95 to 135. It's just easier. It's less percentage. It just makes for an easier progression. Number 3. What type of boxes do you use for box squatting? We use the Titan Fitness plyometric boxes, like 12-inch boxes from Titan Fitness. That's the ones I use. Not sponsored by them or anything like that. It's just those are the ones that I've used and I liked. I have one at my own house, so I use that to squat with. My kids use them. So yeah, that's pretty much what we use for the box squats. As far as like heights and stuff, though, I can probably pull those for you. Go to my team builder. So I have those listed here. So my box heights, my 5'5" and under kids are using the normal 12-inch box with no plate or anything, just the 12-inch Titan Fitness plyo. My 5'6" to 5'9" kids are using a box and a 25-pound plate, which is about 1.5 inches or so. Depending on the brand of 25-pound plate that they use. If they use the right fitness one, I think it's maybe a little over that. If they use I forgot what the other brand is. We have a bunch of different bumper plate brands. I didn't buy them. They're here before I got here, but depends on the brand. I prefer them to use the lower ones. And then 5'10" to 6'2", they use a box and a 45-pound bumper, and they use the Olympic weightlifting bumpers. They don't use we got away from the black bumper because they were just a little bit higher. Those reds that we use, or we have blacks that are like the same height, but those really fat bumpers, the fat black ones, we don't really use those very much when they're too thick. And so we went down a little bit to like the thinner black ones and then the thin red ones, and those work better. Those are about 15 inches. And then our 6'3" or over kids are using a 45 bumper and a 25 bumper plus the box. So it puts them at 16.5, 17.5, depending on which brand of bumper they use. As long as they're consistent with the bumper plate, I don't really care. As long as they're consistent with the bumper plate and they're sprinting and their jumping keeps going, it gets better, I don't really care. Number 4, I know you talked about low rep sets in my 10-week program. This is a message I got a couple days ago. In my 10-week program for my main muscle exercise, I started about 6 reps, then gradually go down by the weeks and ended about 3 reps. My intensity is going up as the weeks go on. What do you think about that? This looks like just a classic linear periodization scheme. That's fine. It works. Kids get stronger doing that. In my opinion, you can get more out of using undulation than you can with just like straight, knocking down volume and increasing intensity. You can do that and it works really fast and works good, especially for younger kids. But I've just seen that when you start undulating, you start kind of instead of just having this straight line of intensity and straight line down in volume, when you start kind of undulating them into a wave, you make faster progress. Kids are just able to kind of add a rep here, add 5 or 10 pounds here, They're able to recover a bit faster mentally. They don't get bored as much. And if you run straight waves the way that I used to run some straight waves, my brief maximal tension, you'll see that kids will sometimes run into a wall. And so you need to kind of have that flexibility of dropping, dropping volume and then adding a rep here, adding weight here. So there kind of needs to be some sort of undulation there as far as changing things a little bit more frequently. So changing volumes and changing intensity, which is just changing speeds. I think you need to change speeds a little bit more often to have a more potent effect on the nervous system. So that's what we began to do. And I used them last year quite a bit, got away from them because I had a lot of younger kids really coming in. So I started using a little bit more straight waves. Now we're back to undulation. I don't even think I would ever go back. The undulation waves are just better. Even for the younger kids, they just work better. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Like if I were you, I would probably look into daily undulation, periodization, changing volumes and changing intensity schemes more often. But that can work. So yeah, that would be my advice on that. But again, I don't know what else you do for your programming. Like I'm not programming you, I don't coach you, so I don't really know what type of training you do. But yeah, I'm sure it works. Number 5, I understand you talk about never using over 6 reps for strength on main list for discharge frequencies. Thank you for sharing that. Are you concerned with that for accessories? Yes. So I'm reading a book right now from Brad Schoenfeld. It's like his hypertrophy textbook that he wrote a couple years ago. I'm going through that now, so I have some things to share on that. A lot of our really good research coming out right now is from like more hypertrophy centric people. Like Chris Beardsley, how well he's kind of more into like hypertrophy type stuff. He has some really good stuff on strength training. I think we're learning a lot more like as far as like stimulating reps and things like that. So for me, I've tended to start lowering sets. Like we used to do 3 to 4 sets of accessories. Now we really only do about 2 sets of accessories. Something else I've been moving them more into like, 4s, 5s, 6s, maybe 8s at the most. I really try to keep a lot, unless it's a new movement that we haven't done in a minute, then I'll give them a little more reps because my weaker kids need a little bit more reps to progress. But really, I really like using a lot of 4s, 5s, 6s, and like 8s at the most for a lot of our accessory stuff, especially like our pressing accessories. Even our triceps, I've started to really kind of dial back some of the overall like reps and kind of going down. For a couple reasons. The first one being is that it's just less volume, so we're going to be able to bounce back a little bit quicker. The workload isn't as much, and because we're getting more stimulating reps right away, discharge frequencies are going to be a bit better. It's the same thing with the main lifts. Like if you are doing a 5 rep max, like you're going to hit that wall a lot faster than if you do a 10 rep max. Your last 5 reps of your 10 rep max are going to be kind of like your first 5 of your 5 rep max. Those are going to be the reps that actually stimulate enough motor unit recruitment and fatigue those fibers. So I've started to kind of tend to go back to a little bit more low rep stuff for accessories, like especially like chin ups and things like that. And chin ups were my first like accessory I really experimented using a lot of low reps on. So we did like 5s, triples, we did singles, we've done 4s, using those lower rep schemes and 6s. We've done AMRAPs before too. But I really saw a lot of benefit from just going to lower rep schemes and giving them a little bit more sets and just loading the weights, right? Like kids are not going to hang weights from them when they're doing 15 or 20 chimp. Most kids are not doing that. But if you give them triples, they're going to start hanging weight and they're going to go up a lot faster and get stronger because it's external load, right? External load's necessary for force development. So if you want to make kids stronger, give them lower reps, have them add a little bit more load. And those, underlying submaximal type outputs are going to raise as well. So yeah, as far as like actual like am I worried about it? No. I do like high rep stuff, especially for like, in my opinion, restoration work. Like to me, if we're using restoration work, if we're doing like hypers, we're doing like banded face pulls, push downs. We haven't done a lot of banded push downs, but if you do like face pulls, things like that, I like those for higher reps and more sets. I like to accumulate, some volume on those. But for like the bread and butter stuff, we're really just trying to push the poundage on and just really, push the intensity. I really just prefer lower reps now. And so what I've continued to see in the literature, and I'm still reading, I'm still learning, but what I've continued to see is that we're getting more benefit. We're getting more strength benefit out of lower reps. We're also getting a similar hypertrophy response, which I've noticed as well. So we're just kind of lowering that type of stuff. Number 6, what are you using for the incline bench setting? Are these done heavy or for reps? And are these a main lift? Settings. I put them on pin two. We have Sorinex benches, so I put them on pin two. I have a Rogue bench at my house. And so I use pin two. That's what I would use. That seems to have the best carryover to the flat bench, which is what I'm more concerned about. We've done steep inclines and things like that, but it's just a little bit too unstable. It's a little bit too high to use enough load to really carry over to the bench. So that's the thing. If you're using variations, you need to use variations that are stable enough and have enough, load capacity to carry over to what you're actually testing. Many times people get wrapped up in like doing a ton of variation or changing variables a lot. If you're changing angles that much from a bench, if you're changing the angle that much, you're just not going to see as much carryover. It's why you see like a lot of overhead pressing not always carry over to the bench. And I overhead press coming from someone that likes to overpress. I think it's fun. My athletes don't really overhead press very much. I prefer them to just do more incline work. But for me personally, um, that pin two is pretty much the best as far as using incline. I learned this when I was in high school. We used to do a lot of incline bench. So we used to bench on one day and then incline bench the next day. And I used to use pin three. And so I started to notice that some of the kids that were stronger benches than me, because I've never been like I'm longer armed. So I've had to work really hard to like get at all my lifts, my upper body lifts up, which is why I've learned a lot about how to bench. It's because I'm really bad at it. So that's something that like I've had to really figure out like the most optimal approach. Whereas like squatting, like I have not, didn't have to work very hard to, I had to work hard, but not as hard as bench. So when we're talking about like incline bench, I started to notice that some of the stronger kids were doing pin two and even just pin one. So I was like, all right, well, I'm doing pin three. It's harder. I thought, well, if it's harder, it probably is going to, carry over more. Maybe I'm going to build more muscle, whatever. Went to pin two. I saw an immediate like improvement in my weight on pin two versus pin three. But then I started actually seeing carryover my regular bench. So then I kind of figured, okay, pin two is like pretty good. Let me try pin one. So I ran pin one for like a year, right out of high school. Like maybe I was like 18 or something. And I ran pin one for a while, and like it was okay, but it was too close to my regular bench to have enough change, in my opinion, and load for it to not like affect recovery. And I mean, at that point, I should have just benched extra sets if I was going to do that. So went back to pin two, and pin two is kind of what we've ran with for a while. I've ran pin four before, which is just really high. I didn't love it personally. I still mess around. I like pin four off straps. I like pin three off straps. I don't like pin two off straps. I like pin two just full range of motion. So incline settings, that's kind of my opinion on that. Are these done heavier for high reps? Heavy and high reps. So we're trying to get load to go up. We're trying to get stronger on the incline. I'm of the opinion that you should be pushing those supplemental lifts. I don't think that we should just keep them steady and just keep them in for volume work. Like if we're going to do them, we're going to get stronger at them. So for me, we're going to push, I use a lot of sixes. I use a ton of sixes. I've actually started using a lot more sixes for my main work too, but I use a lot of sixes for the incline bench, a lot of sixes and fives. I started using a little bit more fours recently, but it's been a lot of sixes and fives for the most part. I use eights as well. Like if we have an incline, if we've, went away, like we just went from a close grip paused supplemental lift. I was having them do close grip pause, no leg drive. So it was like basically a close grip pause Larson. We went away from that, went back to it was really beneficial. We did it for like maybe 9 weeks and kids' benches exploded. It was great. But we're gonna go back to the incline bench just because I think we need a little bit more work in the shoulder and pec. But like the first week back, I think I gave eights, game like 2 sets of 8. And then after that, we started, working down the sixes, fives, and fours. So that's pretty much where we're going to stay as far as incline benching goes. So it's relatively heavy. I don't know what's considered heavy or high reps. People have different opinions on that. To me, if it's over 6 reps, it's higher reps. If it's under 6 reps, it's lower reps and heavy. So that's kind of my opinion on that. So we're gonna use 8s sparingly, but we're gonna use a lot of 5s and 6s and some 4s. I really don't use under 4s. I might use them a little bit more in the summer. I do want to see what it would be like to maybe get it because right now what we're doing is we run a brief maximal tension bench and then I give them like 2 sets of their incline. And I used to run 3 sets, but it was too much. And I ran 4 sets for a little bit. It was way too much. The kids didn't get stronger doing that. It just wore them out. And then their triceps sucked and it's everything else. They just didn't have enough energy or fitness to get through the rest of the session and have some intensity with it. So dropped it to 2, but I would like to flip the script a bit and do like maybe 4 or 5 sets, but like do triples and run it like that. I do want to kind of experiment with that. I did that with chin ups, and I've done that with some other accessories, and it's worked good. So I want to try out the incline bench maybe this summer. Are these used as a main lift? No, we never incline bench for a main lift. We always just bench first. So like I think that's one of the biggest things that people mess up is they try to switch lifts every day. So like they'll have like a main squat day, main deadlift day, a main bench day, and a main incline overhead press day, which is good. People get stronger doing that. But when you have young athletes, when you have young, kids that are still trying to figure out how to actually do the lift, still trying to figure out, you know, what they're doing in the weight room, you don't want to change stuff all the time. And frankly, you're going to really impede progress if you're changing things too frequently. You want to keep things the same as often as possible because firstly, they're not going to get bored. They're not getting overtrained. They're not going to have, nagging injuries and, joint, achy joints and things that like us like older lifters have like when you've been training for a decade or more like you start to feel some of that coming back a little bit, but these young kids don't, and they don't train frequently enough to ever worry about that because let's be honest, how often do you have a kid train 12 months a year 4 days a week for 4 straight years? It just doesn't happen. Kids take time off, they miss, that stuff happens all the time. When you're training high school athletes, you're just not going to have access to them. Even when you're training college athletes, they go away for breaks and stuff. You're not going to have access to them long enough to change things all the time. When it's your own training, you train really frequently. Like I don't miss training sessions. I don't think I've taken a deload week and I don't even know how long. I don't know. I just like training. I'm training right now every single day. I'm doing, training every day. I haven't missed a training session and I don't even know. Probably like 3 or 4 months was my last day I took off. Um, but I like training a lot, so I like to do it often, even if the intensity is a little bit lower. But for these younger kids, they don't have to worry about anything. They can just keep training, 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 and they're going to keep getting stronger. The real thing is, are they training enough? That's the biggest thing with young kids. Are they training enough? If they miss sessions, it hurts them more than overdoing it. It hurts them more to underdo it than to overdo it. So from what I've seen, you need to give kids the same lifts over and over and over for weeks on end, and months on end, even to really see a good gradual progression for them. So that would be my advice on that. Stop changing lifts all the time. Stop, rotating even every 3 weeks. You don't need to rotate drastically every 3 weeks. It actually would be better if you would just keep things the same for multiple waves in a row and just change some accessories and things like that. It works a bit better. Kids get stronger. Kids learn the lift. You don't have to worry about reteaching stuff all the time. And you can just progress them. Like basically, once they get it, you can just keep loading, 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 loading over and over instead of like loading, loading, getting a couple good sessions. Then boom, all right, we're going to switch to pause bench or we're going to switch to front squatting. Like, don't do that. Just keep things the same for a couple months, and then keep the main lifts the same, keep your bread and butter the same, and then just switch them slightly. Right? Like if I went from we just got off pause benching, now we're back to regular benching. I changed one variable. Right? We flat bench all year round, but I just change a variable or two variables. I just change little things. Right? It's not direct like crazy change. Okay. So that would be my advice for like pretty much all training is you don't need to change stuff all the time. So that's all my questions I have. I had 6 questions, so hopefully I answered all those, relatively good. So hopefully you guys took away from some things of that. I have some more podcasts coming. I've been trying to. I have like I don't know. I have like probably 3 or 4 that I've wrote out what I want to talk about. I just need to actually sit down and do them. Been busy, so I have not sat down and like made the time to do them because I've been busy and kind of doing some other things. But summer's around the corner. We got a couple weeks and then I'm pretty much free for 3 months or whatever. So I have a lot of stuff that I want to do. It's just sitting down and spending the time doing that. But thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. You guys have been killing it on the every top podcast I've been posting has been just doing crazy numbers. So I appreciate it. Like I said, I've only been doing this for, I don't know, like 4 months now. And my podcast is like, we just hit 2,000 downloads on Spotify and YouTube is going up. And my followers on Spotify is over 100 now. So it's going pretty good. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support. I will talk to you guys next time.